Thank you for joining us today to the panel, The Many Roads to Self-Publishing. I'm here with four amazing authors, and we're going to talk all things self-publishing. So if you could take a moment and introduce yourselves. Whitney, why don't you start?
Yeah, sure. Hey, I'm Whitney Hill. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the best-selling and award-winning self-published author of the Shadows of Other Side series, which starts with Elemental. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about my journey to self-publishing and the different tips and tricks that have helped me get to where I am.
All right, and I'm just going to move right down the line on how I see people up top. Mary Beth.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Mary Beth McCarthy. I publish as M. Dalto. I am a young adult and new adult fantasy writer. I have done pretty much everything across the gambit between self-publishing and indie presses and Wattpad and hopefully all that experience can contribute to the conversation today.
Tess, if you could go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cass Kim. I am a self-published author of the Wilders trilogy, which is young adult. I also do an annual charity anthology series, the Autumn Nights anthology series. So the first one donated to the ASPCA. This past year's donates to Feeding America, and 2021 is going to donate to St. Jude's Research. I also create children's picture books that are based on sound, like speech, sound, phonics, and articulation.
And finally, Michael, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Michael J. Sullivan. You can probably tell that from the intro. I do science fiction and fantasy, probably most well known for the R'yr Revelation series. I've been self-published, small press published, and big 5 press published. So I've kind of done all of those, and I think I've been pretty successful in all of them. So it's good that I can kind of like speak to all of them without a bias toward one or the other, because it's not that big of a deal. Because some people will like look at one thing and say, "Oh my God, I'm really good at this, but not that, so this works better." But I don't really have that too much.
And that actually leads me to my first question. Why did you choose self-publishing?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started out by querying agents looking for traditional publishing path with Elemental. And I got some really good feedback. I got, partials and fulls and, people saying, yeah, this is a good story. It's really well written, but I just don't have a space for it. So that's when I started thinking about, okay, well, how else can I get this story out here? It was, a story I really believed in. It was a story I loved. And as I was doing my research, I saw, things like you could have more control with self-publishing, you could get more of the royalties, there would be more work, you have to wear all the hats, but I was okay with that since my background was in marketing already and I was already kind of familiar with working as a business. So I decided to make the business decision to change my path to publishing to self-publishing. And then it kind of helped or didn't help, I don't know, however you want to see it, that at the same time that I was looking at all of that, there was a lot kind of blowing up in the traditional publishing industry around some ongoing racism. And I really had to sit down and ask myself if that was something that I wanted to deal with at that point in my life, in my professional career, in my writing career. And it wasn't. And it's not to say that, self-publishing automatically escaped it, but it made it something that was more within my sphere of influence and my sphere of control as to what I dealt with and how. So yeah, I am really happy with my path so far and looking forward to speaking to the rest of the journey.
Yeah, so very similar to Whitney, I, started out querying agents. I ended up with my first debut series with a small press because what I was coming across is I generally write new adult, and in traditional publishing, there's no shelf space for it. So that was really what made me starting going down that path, is that I want to write what I want to write, not what the market demands. And I found that freedom more with the more, not necessarily even like small press, but also with self-publishing and being able to, like, again, what Whitney said, being able to control what I write and how I put it out.
So I actually, as you can tell, I'm wearing scrubs right now. I'm actually a speech language pathologist as well. I work in the medical side of it. And I just like to do things on my own timeline. And I think for self-publishing, you have a lot more control over how that works. You can control your deadlines, you can control your release dates. And to me, being able to have that sense of control is very important. So that's why I chose to self-publish.
Well, I started trying to get published before self-publishing was really a thing. Back then, there was no such thing as really ebooks and Kindle. So I was kind of started off querying, trying to get an agent, got an agent. That agent took my book around, didn't really get too far with the major publishers. There were still a few small publishers we were submitting to, and that didn't look like it was going to go anywhere. So at that point, I started looking into self-publishing, and this is the kind of thing you print up your own books and you would sell them out of the trunk of your car kind of deal. But at some point we discovered that one of these small publishers in Minnesota actually wanted to pick it up. So I went with them. They had some financial problems. It didn't work out. So I got my rights back to that and started self-publishing, because at that point, that's all I could do, because I had deadlines and people were expecting my book. So then I went into self-publishing, did my first 5 books that way. They did very well, so much so that I could take those numbers to New York, ask them, well, now that you can see how much money I'm making, do you want a part of this pie? They said, yes, they would very much like to do that. So I got published through Orbit, which is a subsidiary of Hachette. After publishing for them for a while, then I wanted to go up to hardcovers. They were unable to do that. So then I went to Random House and started publishing through Del Rey. Okay, after that, then we got to the point where I discovered I was making a lot more money through audio, and all the big publishers wanted to claim the audio rights without giving any more money in return for that right, to which point it became financially kind of stupid for me to stay with the big publishers. So now I'm moving back towards self-publishing, because they won't break out that right, and I'm not willing to give it to them because it's worth more than they're going to give to me for the entire contract.
That's a journey. So really, this is not one of the next questions, but just like a follow-up. It seems like having almost a jack of all trades is kind of helpful in the self-publishing world, of being able to have all these like skills.
Well, it certainly helps when, I mean, the people here who are self-publishing understand that it's a business and you have to be able to do all of that. You have to be able to hire editors and do copywriting and do your covers and do all that. If you can't do all that, then you probably aren't really a good fit for self-publishing. And I just want to make sense that what I just told you about the history is probably the most concise I've ever managed to do. So you have no idea how important that was, and I feel really good about it.
Well, that's actually leads me to the next question for everybody is, what do authors need to know before deciding to self-publish? And I'll go down the line again. Whitney.
I mean, just to really emphasize what Michael said, you have to wear all the hats and you have to be ready to do that. And when we say all the hats, that is not just the creative side. So, you know, the writing and the editing and the covers, that's also the business side. It truly is a business. You need to do the marketing, you need to do the sales, you need to do the tax, the legal, any part of you are effectively a small business. And if that doesn't appeal to you, I mean, I'm gonna again back up what Michael said. This probably is not a track that you will enjoy. It's probably not a track that you will really feel successful with. And then I think another thing that you need to know as you're deciding is, what's your goal? Why are you doing this? It's easy to say like, yes, I want to publish a book, but why do you want to publish that book? What's your reason? Are you trying to win awards? Are you trying to be a bestseller? Are you just happy to hold something that you created in your hands and have a few people read it? So just really understanding your motivations and mapping out your skills and how you want to get there is going to be so important to the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm going to be piggybacking this whole time, but along the same lines of what Whitney and Michael said, you have to know it is a job, and you have to know what your own personal skill set is and what you are willing to ask for help on. Like I said, it is a business. You know, there are some who do it part-time, some who do it full-time, but you have to understand that writing the story is the easiest part. Everything that comes after it, that's where the real work begins. And, like it's been said, you have to put that effort in. You have to have that plan. You have to know what you want to do, how you want to move forward, or it will get stale, and you'll be cutting yourself short before you even start.
Yes, I agree with everything that everybody else has said so far. It's 100% true. There's so many different hats that you have to wear. And I think another thing that you need to be prepared to do if you're going to self-publish is you have to be prepared to step out of your shell. I have a really hard time selling myself and advocating for myself typically. And it's something that I've had to learn a lot as a self-publisher, is the willingness to talk about how great what you've done is, and to talk about that to complete strangers while asking them for a favor of like having your book on their shelves, or reviewing your book on their popular blog. You have to be able to step out of your comfort zone and do that sort of thing if you're like introverted or ambiverted, like so many of us are. Or you have to know somebody that can, or have a budget for somebody that can.
Excellent. And Michael?
Kind of started this whole thing, so I kind of feel like I already went.
Okay. And actually, this time I will switch it up and we'll start with Mary Beth. So, and we'll just kind of move down so that we don't get too much into one rhythm. What are some myths or misconceptions about self-publishing?
Oh, I feel like there are so many, and it's really unfortunate for the industry. I personally know people who believe that self-publishing is a last resort, who feel they weren't good enough to get into the traditional marketplace, which is 100% wrong. I mean, just listen to what we've said already. You want to take control of your project. You want to take control of your writing. You want to make it a business. Thinking that it's a last resort is probably one of the most painful misconceptions of the industry. And along with that is that anybody can self-publish, therefore the books are going to be subpar, which I've had some amazing self-published books come across my way that I thought were edited better, had better covers, read better than what the big five was putting out. And again, this is just a personal experience, but the misconception that a self-published book is going to be a poor read is something that I really would love that stigma to just go away, because I think self-published books are just as good, if not sometimes better, than what the big five is putting out.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that's probably the biggest myth, and maybe the worst thing that impacts self-publishers. I think one way to kind of avoid that is doing the look inside option on Amazon. It's a good way to kind of see what the quality is before buying. And it really does run, unfortunately, the spectrum though for self-publishing. And it's just a bummer that so much of that has to drag down the people who put in the hard work and do all the extra stuff that needs to get done to make a quality product. The other thing that I really wanted to highlight is, self-publishing is not a nothing else worked kind of option. For some people it might be, but for many of us it's not. I never queried once. Since then I've queried some nonfiction pieces for like magazines and stuff, but I haven't queried a book. And so I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind, is it's not just a last resort, it's a valid method of getting your work out there.
I think one of the misconceptions I usually run across is that you can't make money in self-publishing. That either people think, well, I'm just going to write my first book, put it on the internet, and I'm going to make $1 million. Or for the most part, the people who actually know what they're doing about writing have the impression that you can't actually make money self-publishing, because there is such a proliferation of books out there. There's so many that it's super saturated and there's no way you're going to be seen anymore. And therefore you're going to sell like 10 books or something, maybe, if you're lucky. Personally, I know a great many traditional publishers, and I know a great many self-publishers. And for the most part, I think the self-publishers are making a great deal more money due to the fact that you don't have to sell quite as many books to make a great deal more money, because you're making far more money per unit. So you can get by, if you're a mid-list author in a traditional publishing house, you're not making much money at all. You're not going to make enough to live off of it. You're going to have a day job as well. But if you're a self-published author and you're doing the same thing, you're going to be making a fairly decent wage because of the amount of money coming in. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. But of course, To do that, you actually do, like everyone said, have to run it like a business. This is two hats you have to work on. You have to be able to get the writing done correctly, and then you have to be able to do the business end of it. And if you can do that, and if you can look into what other people are doing and stay current with trends, such as using things like Kickstarter and Goodreads to leverage your investment, you're probably going to be making a great deal more money than what most people would assume you would be capable of doing.
And yeah, actually, Michael, I hope you don't mind me coming back to you. I was wondering if you might be able to define what you call a mid list, because I'm not sure if our audience, if they're just starting out, if they'd really have that idea.
Mid list is probably selling less than 10,000 books a year, or for the total life of the book. Usually what happens is you come out with a debut book. It sells really well, usually through pre-orders, and then it immediately drops off. This is exact opposite from self-publishing, where you start selling very few books, and then slowly over a very long period of time, you can build an audience. But if you're in traditional publishing, what usually happens is you end up having a big splash at first, and then it drops off quickly. And most books, probably for a mid-list author, is probably only going to be selling, like I said, 10,000 if you're lucky, for the entire life of that book. Just a second here. I have my wife here who's actually the expert on this.
Yeah, so I handle a lot of the publishing end of Michael's books, and I do a lot of talks on publishing. Generally speaking, for a publishing house, a mid-list is someone who their books kind of make money. They barely make money. Some books will be actually a loss for the publisher. Some will be a modest income for the publisher, but they're not really like carrying their load. Once an author gets above the mid-list, generally what's happening is the amount of money that they're bringing into the publisher is actually supporting the mid-list. It's holding up the mid-list. So mid-list authors tend to get fairly conservative advances, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000 to $10,000. Their total, and many of them, a vast majority of them, will not earn out that $5,000 to $10,000. So in the old days, the mid-list used to kind of be where most authors fell. There would be some very few, very highly compensated authors. There would be a vast number of people in the mid-list, and then there would be some people who fall below the mid-list, and generally they would stop being published. Nowadays, the publishing's changed a little bit, and you often hear about in publishing companies the mid-list being squeezed. And what that means is that they will keep less mid-lists on their roster. So if your book is coming in at a mid-list, it may be dropped completely, because they're expecting each book to be making much more money than they would like maybe in the 10 or 20 years ago.
And she's here for all the numbers. I don't know the numbers. I write books for a living. Okay, I just sound like I know what I'm talking about, and that's probably a bigger answer than you were expecting from that simple feedback.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I mean, I'm not sure how the experience has been for the other self-published authors here, but it can be kind of difficult to get an idea of numbers. And I think that's, one of the challenges for self-pubbers is to know, like, am I succeeding? So just being able to say, like, okay, over the lifetime of the book, it's 10,000, or, and just looking at royalties, I think that's really helpful for people. So thank you for that. And so again, sorry to derail, but with regard to myths or misconceptions around self-publishing, I would say how difficult it is. And that seems to go on both ends of the spectrum. You have some people who think it's the easiest thing in the world to do because, there are millions and millions of self-published books, so it can't be that hard. And those are usually people who will go into it and not put enough effort in. And that's where we see, like, what Mary Beth was talking about with just subpar product, which unfortunately impacts the whole market. And then you have the people who like psych themselves out of it, thinking it's too difficult and that they could never learn it. And they psych themselves out and just reach a point where they just don't even want to try. And unfortunately, I think if those same people don't see another path, they may drop out entirely and we may lose those stories. So I'd say, again, the myth is the level of difficulty. So just taking a step back and understanding, like, this is a thing I can learn is going to be really important.
I guess before you actually publish your book, you have to get your book together. You have to write it. You have the whole other gamut of what you have to do yourself now, the whole editing, book design. what are your tips or any guiding advice for how to choose what to do yourself and what to hire out? Um, that's, one thing people walk in think, oh, I have to do this all myself because I'm self-publishing, but there are resources out there. It's just knowing which ones to use or knowing which ones to advocate out. And Cass, could you start?
Sure. So I think some of the ones that you can, it just really depends on who you are and like what your skill level is. I think if you have really good beta readers who are honest, but like in a good way, constructively honest with their feedback, you have the potential to be able to skip some of the editing. So like you could do a really strong round of beta reading with like 3 really good beta readers, but your beta readers have to not just be great writers, but they also have to be great beta readers. So they have to have 2 skills. And then if you did that and you edited, you could probably get by with like Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly or something like that for the proofreading aspect of things. And then maybe have a really good friend that you trust who knows their stuff when it comes to punctuation, go through and check for typos and punctuation. And you might be okay that way, depending on how well you write, what your grammar knowledge is and all of that stuff. Cover design, I designed my own covers for my first books, and then I paid for good covers for after that. Well, Faye Lane made this one for the Autumn Nights charity anthology for free because she's the best, but because it's a charity anthology. But I think like cover art is really important for gaining attention. Everything else that you build on is going to require that cover to get that attention, like any marketing ads that you do, things like that. So I think cover art is a good place to invest. And you're going to have some kind of marketing budget because people can't buy what they can't see. And I'll let other people say other things.
Well, I think one of the things you have to know how to do is pretty much not try and do everything yourself. Because when I first started, you did, because there was no resources out there for anything. I had to do all my cover art, all my interior design, all my layout, all my font work. I did all that myself because there weren't anything. But now, my God, there's many places you can go to have cover art done and of all different levels of pay and price. You can get really expensive stuff and really cheap stuff. You can get people to lay out your book for you. You can get people to do editing and again, the gambit is, probably from $300 to $4,000. So there's a huge array of things you can do. But one of the things you have to get good at is project management. You have to be able to organize all these people and be able to figure out how to find good people. Now, like if you're looking for a good editor, one way you can do it, the way my wife has a tendency to do it, is she tends to get a number of people from different levels and she'll ask them to edit like 3 pages, as much or as little as they want, and then tell me based off of that sample how much they would charge for a full-length book. And then based off of that and seeing what kind of editing they do, you can make the decision whether this is a good fit for you or not. There are a number of different ways you can, work with people and figure out what you need to do to make your book be the best it can be. But you have to be able to put out a book that is as good as anything that you'll see put out by the Big Five. And if you can't do that, you're probably going to be shooting yourself in the foot and you probably will not be able to sell. Because people judge a book by its cover. They're going to judge it by the first misspelled word on the first page. They're going to judge it by all these things. And it's best to try and get the most professional people you can. But that doesn't mean you spend top dollar. I mean, I know editors that will charge you $4,000. They're terrible. They are no better than someone who would charge you like $1,000 or even $300. In fact, it's better to probably have 2 people that will charge you like $300 than it is to have 1 person who would charge you $1,000, because you have 2 sets of eyes on it, and no editor is going to find all of that. So just being able to find and utilize all these different people, you're going to be better off. And I think that's probably all I have to say.
Yeah, so I mean, I think those are really great points, and I'd add to say, what do you want to do? Because a lot of this, I mean, it's been mentioned, it's a job. This is a job that you can choose. So not just what do you want to do, what do you hate doing? That's maybe something you want to outsource, because if you start hating self-publishing, that'll be what, 1, 2, maybe 3 books, and then you're like, gosh, I don't want to do this anymore. So don't set yourself up to hate what you're doing when you got into it for the love of writing and the love of books. Look at your background and transferable skills. So my background is marketing. I'm not outsourcing my marketing. I outsource my editing because, as has been mentioned, people will look at the first word on the first page, it's misspelled, and they will get you. I outsource my cover design because I can look at art and see, is it, is this cover well done or not? I can't make it myself. And I don't try. I know my limits. I know my skills. So that's definitely where you want to start is, what feels good, your transferable skills, what can you do already? And then look at what you want to learn, because there is going to be some element of learning for all of this, especially if you're very new to it. So what excites you about the journey? And see if you can try to do some of that.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what I was going to say. I mean, think about what you want to do, what you can do, and realize that you don't have to do everything yourself either. Um, like I said, make sure you set a budget or you can run yourself in the red really fast. Um, know what your skills are, like Whitney said, but also know where you need help. Um, I'll kind of piggyback on Cass. You can have the best beta readers, and you can have and they can help you through development and content. To add to that, I would say just have maybe one extra set of eyes on it before everything's said and done, whether it's a friend who doesn't know your story, or somebody you can outsource freelance to look it over, just to get that extra set. Because as we've said, especially since self-publishing is so much more scrutinized in this industry, it doesn't matter who you are, how good your story is, that first misspelled word, the typo, the grammatical error, and that's what they're going to pick up on. So do your due diligence, just to make sure that you are putting forth the best product you can. Very similar to Whitney, I am not a graphic designer. I know that. And just like Michael said, people do judge books by their cover. If it is something you can invest in, if it is something you can put a little bit of a budget aside for, I would highly suggest, look for a decent cover. Obviously not saying that you need to spend an exorbitant amount of money or you need to find the cheapest thing out there, but just know that that is going to be the first thing someone is going to see when they look at your work. And so I would highly suggest that maybe number one to consider investing in. Everything else, again, like it's a learning experience. I myself, I had to learn to do a lot more marketing than I'd ever been comfortable doing before. Much like Cass said, putting yourself out there much more. But again, know your limits and push yourself. I mean, it doesn't say you have to do, again, you don't do everything yourself, but know your limits, know what you're comfortable with, know what you want to learn, and put yourself out there.
So a reoccurring theme with these answers is the going out and finding other people to do that can help you. Are there tools, are there websites, are there places, resources where you can go to find a cover designer or find an editor other than just going on Google and just typing in cover design and hoping? Michael, why don't you start?
I'm going to let my wife do this because she's the one who actually does this.
So the first place I would suggest people go to is there's a site called The Creative Pen. It is the website of Jenna Penn. I think her name's Jenna. And she actually has a page on cover designers. And she lists, I don't know, there's probably 15, 20 different cover designers that she has on there. And every single one of them are top notch. Damonza, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but Damonza has done. The thing that's most amazing to me about self-publishing covers these days, because I've been in the self-publishing business, I'm sure a lot longer than anyone else here, is the covers are amazing. We routinely will post on Michael's site, look at these self-published authors' covers. I mean, they look better than you're getting from the big five. And some of these have been gotten for $350, $400, and they're just amazing. There's also, a site, I think it's called Dr. Dragon's Design. They're very good.
What else other than cover?
Well, then for editing, what I suggest is to go to a site called ACES, ACES, and that stands for the American Copy Editing Society. And they have a job board, and for free, you can post to ACES. You can say, you know, I have a fantasy book. It's 120,000 words. You know, I'm looking for someone to edit it. And that doesn't cost anything to run that ad. And then what we did, like Michael said, is we got something like 200 different editors from the American Copy Editing Society who said, I want to do it. And then we would, you know, look at their sample edits of our book, generally something in the middle of the book as opposed to something at the beginning of the book, because your beginning of the book is generally very, very polished. So if you take something from like chapter 10, and what Michael was talking about as far as fit is concerned, you'll find editors that go the whole gamut. Some that are just making very, very minor tweaks, you know, adding a comma here, you know, changing the its from a contraction to the other version. And then you have people who like completely rewrite your stuff, like it's like they're ghostwriting. Now, maybe some people want that. And if so, that would be a good fit for them. For us, that wasn't. We were looking for something kind of in the middle ground, you know. But by looking at these samples, we were able to, you know, kind of get a feel for that. There also is a very good site called Reedsy, REEDSY, and they vet and work with editors and cover designers. I personally have not used them before because we kind of have our own team that we've been working with for 8 years or something.
Do you have anyone who would do layout work? I mean, now we do our own, but anyone else?
I don't, but I'm sure there are lots of companies that do that. You know, like a couple of the other panelists, our background is in graphic design. So for us to lay out a book is pretty easy. And quite frankly, what we did the first time we laid out a book is we cheated in the fact that we took a really good selling book, Harry Potter, and we looked how much margin did they have on the right? How much margin did they have on the left? How much margin did they have on the top? How much margin did they have on the bottom?
And we use their font too.
Yeah, we in the back,
because it's the only book I know that in the back it tells you what the font name is.
yeah, they happen to use a font called Garamond, and I'm like, well, if Garamond's good enough for Harry Potter, it's good enough for us. And we even would look to see how many lines were on a page. You know, if they had 26 lines, then we set up our spacing so that ours came out at 26 because we knew that looked good. I think when people do layout, some self-published books I get because I do a lot of lectures, and people will walk up to me after the lectures and hand me their self-published book. If the layout of the book isn't done well, it really looks like a self-published book. And I'll tell them, I'll say, look, this does not look like a professionally laid out book. This looks like you did it yourself.
I think that's enough, isn't it?
That was awesome. And I can actually say, as a huge typeface nerd, I have noticed more and more, not many, but more and more books are starting to include the typeface. And I slightly geek out every time I see that. Whitney.
I like it when they actually give the history of the typeface. I'm sure you do too.
I do. It's downstairs. I literally have a book that's that thick on just the history of typefaces. It's something like 100 and something different typefaces, and it gives the history of every one. So, but again, huge typeface nerd. Sorry. Whitney.
Yeah, so I'd say Reedsy, as was already mentioned, is one resource for people to go looking for reputable, sources. I actually find people on Fiverr. I don't know if that's a good word or a bad word around here, but I find my beta readers on Fiverr because you can, vet them. And for me, obviously, as we've said, this is a business. I need to get a book turned around. I don't have time to wait for a beta reader to make time to find it. So if you can invest in that time, you can find somebody with, a certain degree or a certain expertise that can help things go a lot faster. I actually got my cover from an artist on 99 Designs. So that's just 99designs.com. If you're brand new, you have no idea what you're doing with covers, you can run a contest. You will get different qualities depending on what kind of contest you run. I think I got very lucky with mine, and found a fantastic artist that I ended up sticking with, working directly for each subsequent book. But there's lots of different options out there for people to try, and I'll see if anybody else has more to add.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in the Fiverr camp because I do feel like it is give or take, but I do, again, with the turnaround and the cost, there are some decent people out there with talent, that are trying to just get themselves out there too. I also have found that Facebook groups can actually be an interesting source for cover work. Um, Whether you're looking for ideas and places to start your search. I've actually been able to find a bunch of, especially for fantasy, cover groups on Facebook, and that's also been an interesting research, if not even for someone to get a cover from, but for inspiration, so that you can keep things in mind when you do come to need to make some covers up.
Okay, so I'm actually a freelance editor, but I do like line editing and developmental editing. I'm also a freelance beta reader, and you can find me on like Fiverr and Upwork, where I've been hired a lot. But what I will say is like word of mouth is very good because clients who come to me through my website versus a third party site are more likely to get a discount on my services, like a returning client discount or something like that, especially if I worked with you and enjoyed working with you. Hopefully that doesn't get me in trouble in the future. But I wanted to say, like, yeah, Facebook groups, or even asking the writing community in Twitter or like on the Discord for Write Hive. You can really get good word of mouth recommendations because somebody's not going to tell you somebody did a good job for them if they didn't do a good job for them, most likely. And then you can always vet them by asking for samples or looking at their samples of their work, of course. So like Faylane is a really great cover artist. I found her through word of mouth. And then for formatting, I always hire out covers and formatting because I am totally like a word brain. I have no visual skills. So like Nicole, who wrote in this book, she did the formatting for this book, and she does these cool chapter headings when she does formatting. And I know you can find her on Fiverr as well. So like word of mouth is super great. And that's what I would recommend is starting there, because you might be able to get some deals or more information from the direct website versus a third party site if you do like somebody's work.
And actually, Cass mentioned Twitter. That's another great one. Hashtag RevPit, revise and resubmit, is a editing contest. That's where I found my editor, Jenny Chappelle. She's amazing. And there are a lot of excellent editors who participate there. So definitely check that one out if you're looking for people.
So now you have your book, you have your cover, you have your file for InDesign, or to get it printed and whatnot. What avenues are available to self-publishers to then get that book out there? And we'll start with Whitney.
Yeah, I'll just go really quick because I'm sure we have all similar ones. But you could use Amazon, Ingham Spark, Lulu if you want to go, kind of big retailers. If you want to go to an indie bookstore, you're going to have to go beyond Amazon. We don't want to ask indies to buy books from their biggest competitor. You could look at something like Wattpad. If you just want to test the waters and see, like, do people like my style? Does this, kind of new thing work? Or you can just put something on a personal blog. So those are 3 that I would test.
Yep, I'm going to jump on that Wattpad bandwagon because that's actually where I started. I wrote my first story thanks to NaNoWriMo years and years ago. A friend told me to publish it, put it up there to see, how people, reacted. And it actually turned out to be my debut novel that I did later on. And I continue to put my drafts up there on Wattpad. I think it's a great resource. Like you said, just to test the waters, feedback and stuff like that. I'll also suggest, if you are interested in getting a story out there, but you're not really sure if you want to go the Amazon, that route, box sets. A lot of times you can find people to go in together on anthologies or box sets And then you're all going in together on Amazon at once. So it's not all completely on you. I've done that with a couple, a story, you know, it doesn't even have to be a full-length story, like, you know, 30,000 words, 40,000 words, get it in with a lot of similar themed stories. And it's a different experience, but it also helps get you out there while you still have the control to do it as well.
Yeah, I would second that. I've pretty much worked with KDP, which is Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, and Ingram Spark. But I will say I know from Facebook groups, I haven't done this personally, but I know like the full color layouts for picture books are expensive to print. So I do know that people actually do print runs in like China or like other companies like that and have them shipped to their house. And then they actually create their own seller account on Amazon or sell direct through their website or that sort of thing too. So that's an option to look into if you're looking at cutting down the print costs and you're super willing to do all the outgoing work that you have to do in that aspect.
Yeah, I'm going to handle this one because it's.
I was going to handle this. She looked at me. She goes, no, I want to do this one. Okay.
So, you know, a couple things, especially because some of your listeners and watchers may not know about various things. So the first thing you have to kind of think about is whether you want to have wide distribution. Well, okay, first of all, are you putting something out there just to get feedback and just to have people reading it, or are you putting it out there to make money? If you want to put something out just for feedback and reading, then yes, Wattpad is a great source for that, but it doesn't monetize for people. If you're going to be doing it to make money, then the first thing you have to think about is, are you going to be wide or are you going to be narrow? And by that, I mean, there's two different ways to sell your books through Amazon. There's called Amazon Select. And basically, if you're in the Select program of Amazon, you cannot sell your book in other venues. You can't sell it on, you know, the iBookstore. You can't sell it on the Nook. You can't sell it on, you know, Google Play. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. Most self-published authors that I know are in KDP. Well, I'm sorry, they are in the Select portion of KDP, which means they are exclusive to Amazon. One of the big perks about when you are Select, i.e., you're exclusive to Amazon, is you will be in their program whereby people who have monthly subscriptions, they can get your book essentially for their monthly subscription price, and you are compensated by how many pages are read. Whereas if you're not in that program, we happen to be wide. The way we're compensated on is for a book purchase. So, you know, in some respects, if you're within the Select program, you kind of lowered that bar because it costs the reader absolutely nothing to try out your book, right? I mean, they have a certain number of books they can have on their shelf at any time, but they can take your book down, they can read the first 100 pages. And even if they stop after 100 pages, you're still going to get compensated for that. But as I said, you have problems with being in the other venues. As for print books, the vast majority of the authors are going to use something called print on demand. And basically what that means is you do not have a huge upfront cost for a printed book. What happens is those books are literally printed on an as needed basis by generally by Amazon or Ingram Spark, who is sending the books into various chains. They might print up 20 when it first comes out, but then after those start selling, they'll print them kind of one at a time. We personally do large print runs. We generally will print 10,000 books at a time. Sometimes we go up as high as 15,000 books at a time. But that's kind of self-publishing 305. That you need an advanced course in that because, you know, we have warehousers, we have distribution, partners. That's kind of a whole thing. I highly suggest that anyone who's starting out in self-publishing, if they do want printed books, that they pursue print on demand as opposed to doing a print run, because we'll drop $30,000 or $40,000 on a print run easily. And I just don't think that a starting off self-published author wants to dig themselves in that big of a hole.
I'm going to hop in. It looked like Mary Beth, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, just to go back to Wattpad for a minute. Within the last couple of years, authors actually have been able to monetize their stories. They have created a paid stories program It is invite only, so not anyone and everyone can join it. But personally, I can say that I have been writing on Wattpad for the last 5 years or so, and I have been able to make money publishing an exclusive story to them. So yes, it's great for feedback and getting out there, but they do have that option now to writers who want to pursue that as well.
Yeah, yes, but you can't opt into that. You can't, you can't say, I want you to do that. They have to say to you, it's just like being picked up by a publisher at that point. In other words, you can't say to them, I want to be in that program. They're going to come to you and let you in that program, correct?
Yes and no. You actually can submit an interest form to show them that you do want to become a part of it.
But they
And then
choose.
they vet you to get to that point.
Right, right. So it's not under your control of whether they're going to pick you up or not.
In that aspect, no. But again, you have to have the story on the pro. So if I put the story out there and I want to present the story to them, I mean, it is whether or not I put the story on there or not.
Right.
Now, the next question I had was already partially answered. Oh, I'm so sorry. Cass, yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm such a hand raiser. I just wanted to clarify too, in case anybody missed it, that the KDP Select is specific to ebooks. So even if you're in Select for your ebook, you can sell your print book like through Ingram for wide distribution as well. So just wanted to clarify that, because yeah, it is really nice to be in the Select for getting new readers if you're an unknown name, but it only applies to your ebook, not to your print book at this point in time.
Awesome. That's a very good tip. In the last question, we touched on wide versus exclusive. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that?
I would just say, like, if you go wide with like Ingram or a different company than Amazon, it's also easier to get into libraries, which can be a really nice way to get your book out there and discovered.
Especially now that Ingram has added library pricing. That's, I think, in the last 2-3 weeks that you can list your book for them to buy directly. So that's been a really great development.
So this next question, I don't want to necessarily say was answered, but we kind of touched on the fact that there's misconceptions and myths with self-publishing versus publishing with a big publisher. And one of the things that I have heard from authors is they say, well, if I'm with a big publisher, I'm going to have success because I'm going to have that publisher behind me. But then you hear from other authors that that's not really the case. What can you do as a self-publisher to try to have to go in with the right mindset of having the momentum that you can have success?
I mean, honestly, I feel like it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you go in believing that you can do this, you're going to get it done. It may take a little bit longer, just again, because you don't have that backing of a publisher behind you. It may take a little bit more research. It may take a little bit more asking for help and assistance if you can't do it yourself. But there's no reason why someone by themselves, or at least as a self-publisher, can't do it with the momentum as a small press or the big five. Granted, you start talking about the big five, they have the money behind them. But I know plenty of self-published authors and small press authors who can do just as well, if not better, but they have to have that drive. It's definitely, you have to want to put that effort in and get there. And again, it's also a matter of making sure you ask for the help or the assistance, become a part of the community, get yourself out there, promo yourself. It is always seems to be a moment of pause for a lot of authors, because they feel like talking about themselves and their work can be seen as a negative thing. And I do feel like that's something that needs to immediately go out the window when you're a self-publisher, because if you're not your biggest champion, then who else will be? So yeah, I think it's just a matter of having that right attitude and that go get 'em, and being able to realize that, yes, you can do this yourself.
I would say just go ahead and get "please review my books" tattooed on your forehead, because you're going to say it so many times. It's just going to save your voice. Yeah, you have to be willing to ask people for that kind of stuff. You have to do a advanced reader copies so that, people who with blogs and people with big followings on Instagram and people who will review reliably in a timely manner are doing that stuff for you on like the first week that you're out and published. Like they can't necessarily do it for pre-sales, but they can hype you up during pre-sales, talk about it on their Facebook and on their Twitter, or I don't know, TikTok. I'm too old for TikTok. But have people who are not too old for social media to hype you up for your pre-sales. And then as soon as you're out there, have them review it. And you have to kind of have that team, and you have to be willing to like beg people to be on that team, and then to send them like friendly, gentle update. You didn't review yet. Could you please? Like you have to be willing to be like that person who's like, step right up, please throw a ball. You get a stuffed animal. Just kidding. You get my book. But like, you have to be willing to do that stuff, because you have to launch, I think, fairly strong. And if you don't, it's just harder to get the momentum going if you don't have at least some momentum starting out. And this is going to ebb and wane too. Like you can't like take a bad week on KDP sales and just be like, towel, garbage can, I'm done. Like you can't, you have to know that it's going to ebb and flow. Readers read more at certain times of the year, books sell more at certain times of the year. And I guess that would be like something that I think people need to be aware of too, is like, you'll have days that you're like, I've ruined my life. And then you'll have days where you're like, I'm on top of the world. And that's normal.
I think it's a misconception that many people have, that if you're published to a traditional publisher, that they're going to take care of you and they're going to get you rich and famous. I know that I think just about every other author that I debuted with don't exist anymore, at least not in an industry that I know about. Because most people think that they're going to get published through the publisher and they're going to do all the advertising. Now, traditionally, it's changing now, but traditionally publishers only advertised to booksellers. So they would sell to bookstores, and they had put a lot of effort into their salespeople and made catalogs to sell to a bookstore. They didn't sell to readers. The bookstores sold to readers. So they're changing that now, and they're starting doing more ads and things, but it's still, the onus is on the author to basically promote themselves. So regardless of whether you're self-published or traditionally published, you have to sell your book. And that's where the success lies, is getting out there, letting people know that it exists. I mean, number one, you have to write a killer book. And I'm going to have to disagree with, I think it was Mary Beth said that that's the easy part. It really isn't. It took 20 years to learn how to do that. It didn't take me 20 years to learn how to sell my book. So that is very hard. If you can get a great book, it makes everything else easier. The second thing you got to do is you got to let people know you've got a great book. And if you can do that, pretty much the thing will take care of itself after that point. But the other key thing you want to know is that when you are pushing your book, when you are advertising it, when you are trying to get people to know about it, it's better to do that when you have more than one book waiting. Because if you get a great push and you only have one book, then you're not getting the return on your investment that you would if you had 3 books out there. Plus, you seem like a much more substantial author. You're not like, I did 1 book and I'm gone. 3 books out there, they get it, they read one. Guys, okay, or maybe this was just a lucky shot. You get 2 books, the 3rd book, and you like it, you're telling your friends. So it's good. The best way to sell your first book is literally to put out the next book, because that's going to give you the best push. But it depends. It doesn't really matter whether you're self-published or traditionally published. You're going to have to be out there selling. You're going to have to be active on things like Goodreads or Reddit or Facebook or Twitter. These are places you're going to have to, for a time at least, really push yourself.
Yeah, so I think marketing's come up a few times. And again, I'm a career marketer. I want to say one really big point: back up and do your market research. Do not just go out and put your book and put your ads and just go. Know your audience, know your channels. So social media, email, website, however you're going to do it. And use a service like Klytics, that's K-Lytics, to research your genre. And the reports you get on there, they're, in my opinion, quite affordable. You'll find out things like, what is the average price? What's the best-selling price? Who are the best sellers? What do the covers look like for those bestsellers? So you're going to go to your designer, you got to tell them what you want. You'll find out things like, what are the categories and the subcategories and all the niches, and which ones are hot and which ones are overdone, and what are people, like, what keywords are people searching for? So before you throw all of this money at your marketing, before you go and shout about your book to everybody, know what you're shouting about. and do that foundational research. And then I think, again, it's going to come back to marketing, but also with your branding, consistency. Know who you are as an author, know what you're promising to your readers, and deliver that consistently. And that might mean kind of moderating yourself on social media a little bit more. It might mean presenting sometimes a more positive face. Honestly, I do see a lot of writers and a lot of authors going to social media, and like Cass said, there are going to be days where you're feeling really crappy about your work and about being an author. Please let me say, maybe don't be so loud about it. Where everybody's going to look and see how crappy you think you are. Because if you don't believe in yourself and you're putting that out there, why would anybody reading that think that this is a book that I want to read? I'm just going to leave this on what you focus on expands. Focus on what you think you're doing well. Focus on what you want people to know about the book. Focus on what you want people to talk about and say about your book. And it doesn't have to be fake. It doesn't have to be like, I love it, it's so happy. If that's not the case, it's okay. But just, watch what you're doing, because it is a business, and you want to present yourself accordingly.
So we are coming up on the hour. This has been a great discussion. Before I leave this, I want to know if anybody has anything they feel anybody out there that wants to be a self-publisher should know that we haven't talked about. And this one I'm going to just open up to everybody, because you may or you may not.
I'll just say, be a part of the community. I know Cass mentioned it earlier, and now I can read it. Like, Twitter has its good sides, but I will say the writing community on Twitter is fantastic, especially if you're trying to find, people who are going through the same processes as you. If you are trying to market, it's a different avenue. And again, not just necessarily Twitter, but just try to find a community of people, because you don't have to do this alone. Even though it is self-publishing, it's ironic, but you can have friends in this industry. You can work together. You can help each other out, boost each other up. You don't have to do it solo.
Yeah, I would have to say Mary Beth's very, very much correct there in the fact that the community, you need to be active, and not necessarily be active as an author, like not being out there saying buy my book, but just being helpful. My wife said when I first started my book, she says, make a blog, make a blog on your website. I'm like, why? No one's ever going to come to my website. Why would anyone come to this random guy's website? So I had to think, how can I get people to come? So I started putting up writing advice, because at least when they came, they could find something that they would find useful. So maybe they would come back. And then of course, going on Goodreads, you're there as a reader. You're talking about other books, not just yours. You're trying to give them advice at books they might like. And so, yeah, I would say that's a great idea to not present yourself as an author, but be part of the community. Because if people see you and think you're a great person, they're more likely not only read your stuff, but tell other people.
I would like to add on to something Whitney mentioned very briefly at the beginning of this, which was the tax aspect of things as a self-publisher. Yeah, so every state has different rules for that sort of thing. For example, I live in Hawaii, and we have a general excise tax for all businesses. So that meant that I had to be paying this extra tax in addition to federal taxes and state taxes for my small business on anything that I sold. So just like really look into the legality of what you're doing as well, because you don't want to get, slapped at the end of the year or something with some tax. I don't know, what are they called? Penalties, fees? I don't know what they're called because I don't want to pay them, and I never will, I hope, knock on wood. So follow the rules so you don't have to do that stuff, and then you don't have to know the name of it.
Yeah, I'd add 2 things, I think. One of them, have a website. I know that people ask, do I need a website? You can even just get one that's like yourname.wordpress.com. You don't have to pay for the domain, all that stuff at the very beginning. But you don't own your social media profile. Facebook owns that, Twitter owns that, Instagram owns that. If they go under, if you get banned, if you get blocked, if you get locked out, you've lost everything you've built, and nobody's going to be able to find you. So don't rely only on social media as your presence online. And I think the other one is absolutely, participate and join the community, but also don't forget the readers. I see a lot of writers and authors who came up through the writing community and forgot at some point to pivot and speak to the people in the wider reading audience. And that's not to say, leave behind everybody. Like, no, don't continue to participate, but expand what you're doing and make sure you're speaking to readers. Not just about word counts or something really niche to the writing experience, but speaking more broadly about the book or the themes that go into the book, or if you're writing about a topic, let's say you have a historical fantasy, and the people who are interested in that are probably going to be historians or interested in history in some kind. Share some of your research, share some broader things in there so that you can mix it up and also appeal to the people who are reading your book.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, everybody. This was a great discussion. I urge everybody in the community to go out and get their books. There'll be links probably on the website and everywhere that you can find them. Thank you very much.